I'm starting off with just a slide of the traditional value chain. Um, the textbook does a great job of explaining the basics of it. And what I want to tell you is that I think the value chain and understanding the value chain is a huge deal, and it's a huge part of the analysis that goes into building a competitive advantage. As you look at the value chain, you should be asking yourself a couple of critical questions. Now, I challenged you, or I hope I wasn't explicit about this, so let me say it explicitly. When you are going back to that valuable, rare, hard to imitate, are you organized? You should be asking yourself questions instead of just am I valuable? Is it valuable? Is it rare? You should be asking yourself, how can I make it valuable? How can I make it rare? How can I make it hard to imitate? Likewise here with the value chain. What can you do in your elements of the value chain to generate more customer value? How do my core competencies fit into this idea of the value chain and the activities that I'm doing to produce my product? And then really I want to introduce this idea of what does it take to develop a competitive advantage as you look at the value chain. You do it one of two ways. You either A, figure out a way to infuse more value such that people will pay more or will buy it more frequently. You infuse that value without driving up cost too much, or you figure out a way to provide the same value as everybody else and do it at a less cost to yourself. And that's going to generate a competitive advantage because you're going to have a lower cost structure. And so this idea of what do I do versus what do I outsource is a huge, huge issue for companies because it's a part of deciding what do I need to be good at and what can I let somebody else be good at? What's central to the essence of my firm and what does not matter? And so the theory is that we create greater more customer value by outsourcing by simply letting people who do things better than we do handle them and let us focus on what it is that we really do. In theory, that gives the company more flexibility. It makes them carry around less cost on a daily basis, and it lets them reduce the risk. So now let's look at the practice and the reality. First of all companies practice outsourcing to varying degrees. For example, if you need a lawyer but you don't have a staff lawyer, you're outsourcing your legal function. If you're a small company and you need marketing help, but you don't have a chief marketing officer, then you're outsourcing your marketing. So we need to kind of see this a little more broadly. Now, 20 years ago, the concept of outsourcing was really controversial because what it translated to was American jobs going other places. For about 10 years, America's accepted the fact that China is the manufacturing ground for most manufactured goods, so it doesn't bother people as much anymore. So when does the outsourcing work well? When you, in fact, have figured out what you need to be doing and you figured out who can do those other things particularly well. Let me give you an example of, and this is a little bit of a dated story, I don't know if it's still working this way, but an example of a great outsourcing relationship. Toshiba, the laptop manufacturer, one of the things you have to worry about is laptop servicing. Now, if somebody's laptop breaks, what's important to them? That it's fixed correctly, but also what? That it's fixed quickly, because time away where the laptop's not in their hand are not quality days if a person really relies on that laptop. So believe it or not, Toshiba outsourced their laptop repair. Okay, it's to whom they outsourced it that may surprise you. They outsourced it to UPS. And the reason they did is they figured out that repairing a laptop accurately was not that hard. It's several diagnostics, and then it's kind of a plug and play the new parts. The tricky part was B, meeting the second customer expectation, which was to do it quickly. And who better to challenge than the company that is a logistics genius? And so literally the way Toshiba did the laptop repairs is you put it in the air shipment. It goes to UPS's air hub in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where the laptop repair facility is. They take the laptop, repair it over the next 24 hours, and it goes out right there in Louisville, and it goes out that next night to return back. So literally, you could ship your laptop out on a Monday evening and have it back Wednesday morning repaired. And so that generated value. So it made sense for Toshiba to outsource that. When does it fail to meet expectations? When you either have not well defined what matters to the customer, or you've picked a company that doesn't execute it to your standards. The standard punching bag on this is how many companies outsource their customer service to non-native English speaking companies, and people were dissatisfied because it's clear you're talking to somebody that's not an American, and no matter how many scripts you give them, it just doesn't feel the same. What risks are involved? Well, you can alienate your customers. You can also lose control of key processes. So now you're not able to put your fingers on everything that really matters. You may lose visibility on what's happening. So surprises may snowball and hit you because you're not expecting it. And certainly you see this in all kinds of negative incidents that have happened. The idea of lead paint in toys when they had to do some major recalls because the Chinese manufacturer was using lead paint and nobody knew. Certainly through the years, this has been somewhat dated, the criticism that Nike took for the working conditions in their factories where some of their shoes were being produced. So when you lose, you have some certain reputational risk when someone doesn't meet up to your standards. You have the risk of the supplier just isn't going to deliver at the price point that you expect. So you are accepting risks. And because of that, I'm going to submit to you that this idea to outsource well is probably a core competency in and of itself, because you have to manage the contractual relations, you have to manage the site visits, you have to manage the relationship, and that may be a very different set of core competencies than it takes to actually make it yourself. But choosing what to produce, what to do, and what not to do is an incredibly big deal. Now, right now, the trend for companies is to try to focus more and more on their core competencies so that they hang on to what the customers value the most and what they really need to be good at, and turn to other firms to allow them to do that. And so this is not nearly as controversial as it used to be because people have it work very well. And you get some startling things like, does Apple produce most of its own products? No, for the most part, the manufacturing is outsourced to Foxconn. And so things are not necessarily what they seem to be. Well, let me go back a slide. Here's the challenges that companies face. Let's take Amazon again. Who does Amazon's outbound logistics? Well, to a large degree, it's UPS that does the last mile delivery. They use FedEx and the Postal Service too. So they use all three of them. But you can bet that particularly as Amazon begins to value same-day delivery in the metropolitan areas, they're going to consider bringing that delivery function, that last mile service, in-house. And so there's this thing, do we need to do this or can we outsource it? And the answer was right for Amazon to outsource its delivery in the beginning. I mean, clearly the right thing to use the established shipping networks. Now that they're so large, you can bet that they're debating, does it make more sense for us to create our own shipping networks, to have our own trucking fleet so we can move our products around? Why might that be a good idea? Well, their leading rival, Walmart, has an outstanding logistics function, and that's seen as a source of competitive advantage for stocking their stores, which interestingly, they've not been able to parlay into the internet world. So interesting where you start to see the boundaries of people's capabilities. So it's very easy to rush through this and say, oh yeah, value chain, got it. Let me tell you, firms deciding what to do and what not to do is a huge part of their strategy. Join me in the next video where we start talking about intellectual capital some more.